This episode contains strong language from the start. Hello and welcome to Life in Stereo, the show where we explore life through the music that shapes us. Each episode I sit down with our guests to talk about the albums, songs and gigs that meant the most to them, the ones that bring back memories, make us feel and even changed who we are. I'm Matthew and I'm your host, and today my guest is Salford-based singer-songwriter whose music feels honest, reflective and rooted in experience. David Lockley is an artist who crafts songs that sit somewhere between personal storytelling and wider social observation, the kind of music that doesn't shout but stays with you. I'm really looking forward to digging into his journey from growing up in Salford to find out his voice as a songwriter and, of course, the albums and artists that helped shape that sound. David, welcome to Life in Stereo.
Hello.
You having a good day so far?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good. I've taken a day off work, so that's always
Excellent.
been good. So I had a beat in Manchester.
I hope it's not just to prepare for today. It's not an exam or a grilling.
Well, it would have been just as well if it hadn't been, because I've not really done any homework.
Well, sometimes the answers on the fly are better than the ones that you prepare for. So, have you been writing any new material recently? Have you been working on any other projects at the moment?
I've had a bit of a fallow period this year so far in terms of writing. I've done a few gigs. I've done quite a few open mic nights, and then beyond that, I've done gigs where I've been invited to play, which is always nice. And also the kind of gigs where you are encouraged to do your own material, which is rare. I mean, if you go to an open mic night, you could do whatever you want. You could do your own material in an open mic night. But I think most people who go to those know that most people do covers and most people want to hear covers. And I don't want to be the guy that people go to the bar when he's on because they don't know anything I'm doing. So you find yourself by sheer peer pressure doing covers at open mics.
Yeah.
So it is nice to do actual gigs where you can get your own material out there, which is nice.
Yeah, it is. And I've heard some of your non-cover material before, and it is really good. I like it. It's very, as an introduction, it's very personal and from the heart and reflective. It's really good. And one of the reasons why I want to have you on so you can share some of your stories and share some of your tales. How do you find then a good balance between including your own music and including cover songs when you're doing open mic nights, for example?
Well, usually if I ever whip up the nerve to do my own songs at an open mic, I'll do covers to begin with, and then slip an original in midway through. So it's like I'm sugarcoating the pill. I'm sort of like softening people up, and then hammering them with something they don't know and they've not heard before. Whereas if I do a gig where originals are more encouraged, it's kind of the other way around. I'll either do all my own stuff, or I will slip a cover in just as a little reward to people for having the patience to listen to stuff they don't know, i.e. my stuff.
Nice.
So that's the balance I try and get.
Yeah. So when it comes down to your songwriting itself, are you someone who always writes your ideas down, or do songs just come to you in bursts, or do you just enjoy like picking up your guitar and just strumming away and seeing what happens?
Usually the latter. I'll pick my guitar up and I'll just fumble away for ages, not necessarily trying to write a song or come up with something. It's just fumbling about, and occasionally something will come up. It'll be a chord change or a little melody. And I think, oh, I like that, and it's not obviously ripped off something else as far as I can tell. But I don't necessarily write things down. I'll just keep fumbling around with it for days or weeks until I decide it's hung around in my head long enough that it's earned its place in a notebook, and then I'll start scribbling things down, and then I'll decide whether shall I get the trusty old Porter studio out and actually record it. Because what I normally do with those is I'll record the song, put it on Soundcloud, and then take the Soundcloud link and put that on Facebook, just as a means of getting it out there. So like,
Yeah.
I've written it, here it is. People can like it, love it, listen to it, ignore it, but at least it's there. It's out in the world to be listened to or forgotten or ignored or whatever, but it's there.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your creative process. That's quite interesting. I like the idea of just, well, being talented enough to be able to just pick up, like, there's a guitar right here next to me in the office. I'd love to be able to just pick something up and just sit there and just strum and then just let creativity take over. But I'm not that creative. Well, that's not true. I am not that clever at playing guitar. I've got soft hands and my fingertips probably couldn't take the guitar strings.
Well, I've got freakishly small hands. I've got Donald Trump hands, so I'm not gifted in that way. So I'll just do my best.
I allow swearing on the channel, but I don't think I can let the Donald Trump comment sit.
No,
I might have to bleep it out. You can comment
I
on his
don't
bastard
blame
if
you
you
for
want
that.
to.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to listening to music, what was the last song that you heard that made you stop and like really take notice and listen?
Ooh, I remember, well, in terms of the first song I heard, which made me stop and take notice, and I'll come on to the most recent one later. But I remember being in a record shop in Bolton with a few friends back when I was 16 years old, and they had music playing in the background as they always do, and it was the usual stuff of the time. So it was like Human League, Soft Cell, whatever, and we were just chatting away and flicking through the vinyl in those days, and this piece of music came on, this sort of beautiful but sinister sort of harpsichord and this weird time signature. And gradually, as this music played, people just stopped flicking through records. People just stopped the conversations. And the whole shop was like, what the hell is this? Who is this? And it was Golden Brown by the Stranglers, which is,
Yeah,
I think it's still a classic, and they're a classic band. But I just remember that moment of this whole shop gradually silencing as this music played, because nobody had really heard anything like that, and certainly nobody expected anything from them like that.
yeah.
So I remember that was one of those songs, one of those moments where people just stopped and listened and noticed the music that was playing at that time.
Do you know what? I don't think I've ever heard. Was it a harpsichord?
I think it was a harpsichord,
I don't
or
think
it
I've
might have been a
ever heard it.
synthesizer impersonating the harpsichord, or that kind of instrument.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It doesn't sound like anything else that I think I've ever heard.
No, exactly. Yeah, it is a unique track. So that sticks in my mind.
Mm,
It's more difficult to think of a more recent one because I do covers. Therefore, every so often I'll think, oh, I quite fancy doing that, and then I'll listen to that song. So it's not necessarily a new song, but one of the most recent ones I did. I decided to have a go at "I Drove All Night," the song that Roy Orbison
yeah,
had
yeah.
a big hit with. I don't think he wrote it, but he had a big hit with it. And I thought, I'll have a go at that. So then I have to pay attention to it, pay attention to what key it's in, what key I'm going to do it in. Am I going to stick to that structure? Am I going to hit Roy Orbison's high notes? The answer to which is no. So how am I going to get around that? And so having to take that song apart to think about how am I going to get up in front of a group of people in a pub and get away with doing that. So that's the most recent song that I decided to incorporate into my meager repertoire.
When it comes down to doing your covers, how do you decide how much of your own personality you're going to put into a track versus trying to copy it pretty much like chord for chord?
That's an interesting question. I know people on the open mic circuit who are really good singers, really good guitarists, and great musicians who will try to emulate every note and every beat of that original song, who are not happy at the thought of doing it in a different key. And for me, it's like, well, whether it's a Smith song or an Elvis Costello song or a Bob Dylan song, fine, it's them, but I'm doing it now. So in a way, I know the song. I might listen to it a couple of times. I might print the lyrics off, but then I will almost deliberately not listen to it too much after that point. I mean, I did with the Orbison song, but otherwise, it's like I will learn the song the way I'm going to do it, and listening to the original too much could actually be off-putting for me, because they may do it in a slightly different way. And I think, well, fair enough, but I don't want to do it that way. But then if I listen to their version too much, the original version too much, that's going to trip me up when I'm trying to do it. So it's like, well, I'm going to focus on doing it my own way.
So, for someone who's never been to Salford, the lovely part of the world that we live in, what does it feel like growing up there musically?
I think with Salford as a whole, the whole notion of Salford is because, of course, it is a city in its own right. And in fact, I believe was granted city status before Manchester was. But people know Manchester, and people look on Salford as a sort of a poor relation or an appendage to Manchester. I bet even Salford tourist information would use a selling point of it being close to Manchester. And it's like Salford is its own thing. And I think because of that, I think Salford as a city tends to have something of a, is on the defensive, not an inferiority complex or maybe more of a persecution complex, but there's this feeling that we have our own scene, and we don't want to be seen as just an appendage of Manchester. So we have things like the sounds from the other city, which is, I mean, the name of it is kind of a pointed reference to this notion of us just being attached to Manchester. So I think if anything, Salford probably tries harder. I remember I've seen images of Peter Hook from New Order and Joy Division playing live, and he'll always make some big Salford reference on the stage, like having a Salford banner on the amps and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, there's a culture and a musical heritage to Salford, which Salford tries very hard to promote, because I think Salford feels we need to work hard at promoting an identity and our own culture and our own musical heritage, more so than Manchester, who are kind of perhaps a bit more complacent.
Yeah, interesting. When did you start songwriting, and can you remember what your first inspiration for a song was?
Well, my dad always used to say that I could never be interested in anything artistically or creatively without becoming an active participant. So when I was small, read comics and I'd look at picture books. So then I'd start drawing, and I really got into art and drawing and sketching and getting all the felt tip pens out. And then I grew up a bit more and started reading longer stories and reading Roald Dahl or Alan Garner or people like that. And so I started writing stories and making up my own little novels and designing the covers for them. And then when I got to a teenage level, I got into music. So, of course, naturally, there's no way I'm just going to listen to music. So I'm going to have to buy myself a guitar, and I'm going to have to learn to play it, teach myself to play it, and then start writing my own songs. Because I'd not thought about it up to that point. So my dad said that I have to participate in things I'm interested in. I can't be a bystander. I got into jogging 10 years ago because I went to see a good friend of mine do the Great Manchester Run. And it was such a fantastic buzz in the city. I thought, right, I'm having some of that. So then I'm jogging and I'm taking part in the Great Manchester Run, because I don't want to be that bloke stood on the pavement. I don't want to be the bystander. And I think that's why I got into songwriting, because I got into music heavily and therefore had to participate creatively. I can remember starting writing songs and being really focused on the music and just cobbling some lyrics together. And then I remember reading reviews of Ultravox or whoever, Depeche Mode or whoever was in the chart at the time, and reading sort of like really scathing comments about the lyrics. I remember being shocked at the time, because I thought, oh my, does that mean people actually listen to lyrics then? Because I'd not really been putting much thought into them up to that point. I just thought they were kind of words you attached to the music, so you had something to sing. It didn't matter what it was. And I was shocked when I realized that people were actually paying attention. So I suppose after that point, I started thinking more about what to write about, Oh, I remember reading an article about Lennon and McCartney, and it said that Lennon always wrote from a very, very personal perspective. He always wrote about himself and about his own feelings and about his own life, about his own experiences. And McCartney didn't as much. McCartney created characters, whether it was Ellen Rigby or whoever. And McCartney stuff was always like removed or talking about a sort of fantastical scenario. And I realised that I'm, in that sense, I lean much more towards the Lennon approach in that I write about myself, I suppose, about my own feelings. I remember looking through. I write my songs in a songbook, a little textbook. I remember flicking through it once, and I realised it read like a diary.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, that's what I was feeling at that time, and then I did that, and then I went there, so I wrote that song about that. And I'm going through the pages, and it's just a catalogue of that year. And I realised I'm just illustrating my life. I'm not by trying to. It's just what I'm doing. If I write a song, I write about how I'm feeling at that time, what experiences I'm going through. So yeah, I write on a very personal level.
So do you think that your musical taste shaped your songwriting, or did your songwriting shape your taste?
I think it would have to be the former. I mentioned Lennon and McCartney, and I'm determined throughout this interview not to sound like a Beatles obsessive and keep dragging the conversation back to the Beatles, but they may get touched upon on occasion. And my first big love was the Beatles. So that kind of melodic approach is what I kind of immersed myself in. Yeah, I guess when I come to write songs, that is going to come through. One of my other big loves is the Smiths. And I have done gigs in the past where I played my own songs. I remember one guy came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, are you into the Smiths by any chance?" So I thought, "Oh, right, yeah." So obviously, that influence has come through. So yeah, whatever I'm listening to, whatever music means the most to me, that is gonna naturally sort of inform the way I put a melody together or a song or a set of lyrics. So yeah, my musical taste definitely shapes what I do.
When you're sitting down to write, are you chasing a particular sound or a certain feeling or a story?
Usually, well, I very rarely sit down to write a song. Like as I mentioned before, I'll sit down to just fumble about,
Hmm.
and something that I think might be worthwhile will sort of like hopefully come out of it. So I'd love to think I was a talented enough songwriter that I could choose a style or a sound to pursue. But really, it's like I'm more, if I can get anything that I think is vaguely worth listening to and isn't obviously copying something else, then I feel I'm onto a winner at that stage. And that's just a question of trying to decide the instrumentation. How is this a fast song? Is it a slow song? Is it a jingly jangly song? Is it a acoustic strummy song? Do I want to put keyboards on it? Things like that. And it's more getting a song that I like in the first place in its rawest form, and then just trying to decide how to realize it in real terms. And I don't make any claims for myself as a guitarist, and probably anybody who's seen me at an open mic night will agree with that. I'm not a brilliant musician. I'm a competent enough musician, I like to think, just enough to get my songs across. So that
I disagree with you, David, because I've seen you play, and I've seen great reactions from many a crowd reacting to your music, and I think
yes.
you were not doing yourself justice there.
Well, you're too kind. You're too kind. But I mean, there are people. I mean, on the open mic, one of the reasons I love creative stuff, whether it's art or writing or music, is it's not a competition. There are people on the open mic circuit who are way better than me. There are people on the open mic circuits I might be better than, but that's not the point. There are people who may not be as accomplished a musician, but who are entertaining and have gotten brilliant personality. I know a few people like that. People you'd much rather watch and listen to than someone far more proficient. So it's not about that kind of. I'm not a big fan of like virtuosity or technical brilliance. Lennon was not a fantastic guitarist, but I'll always listen to a Lennon album.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Right then, David Lockley, let's get into the main segment, your albums and songs in life. No, that's wrong. Your life in song and albums. What's the first album you actually remember owning?
that's easy. Well, when I was a kid, I wasn't really into music. Weirdly, it was embarrassing sometimes because I'd go to school and people had been watching Top of the Pops and chatting about who they'd seen, and I didn't feel I could join in because I didn't engage with music. The only music I listened to as a kid was film soundtracks. I was really into films,
Yeah.
particularly like big buster sci-fi things. So
Hmm.
I'd be listening to the albums I own would be like the soundtracks to Star Wars or Close Encounters. I had the John Williams score to Jaws and Jaws 2, so I used to listen to a lot. And the Bond films, I love the music from the Bond films,
Yeah.
all the John Barry stuff. And that's what I listened to as a kid. And then I think it was the Christmas of 1979, the BBC showed all five Beatles films over Christmas. Again, not trying to keep going about the Beatles, but and I ended up watching them and thinking, that they're all right, those Beatles, aren't they? And my birthday is in the first week of January, so I got birthday money and thought, right, I'm going to get myself a Beatles album. So I went to Bolton, got to the record shop, and found Magical Mystery Tour. So strictly speaking, that was the first proper rock pop music album that I ever bought.
I find it really fascinating that you weren't musical as a youngster. How did it first grab you then? Like, what was it that made you decide, I'm actually going to start playing?
Well, it was weird. It was like getting that first Beatles album. It was like opening the floodgates.
Mm,
And I went from not particularly being into music at all to being obsessed with music pretty much overnight. So initially, I was again completely obsessed with the Beatles. I started buying anything I could. But weirdly, it also meant that there had been things around the music scene prior to me, that kind of epiphany of mine, that maybe I had liked but not allowed myself to like because I didn't do music, therefore I couldn't like the Jam or the Police or XTC or Gary Newman or whoever was knocking around at that time. And then because I now decided actually I do music, I do like music, all those bands and artists who had been around for a few years anyway, I suddenly could admit to myself to liking, and so started collecting them. And my second big thing was David Bowie, the Beatles and Bowie. To this day, I think if I could only take two artists' records to a desert island, it would be Beatles and Bowie.
what was it then that about Magical Mystery Tour that just made you obsessed, or was it just the Beatles in general? Like you binge watched those
Yeah,
movies.
I really got into the Beatles. I mean, that's a fantastic album. I mean, strictly speaking, when it was first released, it wasn't released. It was only released as a EP. It wasn't. It kind of got fleshed out to album status in later years. But there's so much fantastic stuff on it. With the Fool on the Hill, Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields Forever, All You Need Is Love, just immortal classic songs on it. And that, I mean, also it kind of like made me fascinated with the '60s in general. I started staying up late to watch films that had been made in the '60s, just to watch people sashaying up and down Carnaby Street or whatever in '68, and I became obsessed with. I thought, is it possible to be nostalgic for a time that you didn't yourself live through? I wasn't really there. I didn't live through the '60s, but I suddenly became fascinated with the whole notion of that decade. Not obviously the music, but the fashion and the films and that whole ethos. Yeah. So, and weirdly, in later years, this was in the early '80s. This was going through my mind. In the later years, I've become very nostalgic for the early '80s, which I was ignoring when I was actually there because I was too obsessed with the '60s.
That is a great question. I don't think I've done it, but I think we could put that to the listeners and they'll put it in the poll to see what they think because I'd like to see if anybody else has actually experienced that themselves. David, do you remember what the first live gig you ever went to was?
Easy. Like I said, this was the early '80s, and I suddenly like flicked a switch in my head and got into music. And a lot of the stuff that was around at that time was there's the big synthesizer boom. So you had like Gary Newman, Depeche Mode, Tears for Fears, Soft Cell, all those bands, all of which I loved, and I loved that kind of music. But in particular, the band that I really fell in love with was Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, or OMD, as they're sometimes known. And so OMD became my first ever big proper gig I went to, which was at the Manchester Apollo in May 28th, 1984. I think I can say that with some authority because I've still got the tickets somewhere. Yeah, so that was my first proper gig.
Are you a ticket stub collector?
Yes, yes, I am. I've got a box in the loft which I think contains every ticket, if it's whether it's a gig or whether it's a play or even a cinema. But if it's got what I went to see and the date I went to see it, I'll keep it, which is a bit anal, I know, but there you go.
I used to collect movie ticket stubs,
Yeah.
and I had it in a little Jurassic Park Velcro wallet, and I'm pretty convinced it got binned when I was
Oh,
in a house move for like, why have you got these? Because I like them.
yeah.
Rubbish. Boom, gone. But I do like having that confirmation, it's like, well, it's like a diarized entry. Like I was there at this date at this time. I know where I
Yeah.
was, and I can look back at it and go, yes,
Yeah.
that was brilliant.
It's kind of retrospective thing as well. You think one day I will flick through and relive those memories and those gigs. And there are some gigs where I'm sure I'll flick through, and there have been gigs and concerts I've been to that I've forgotten, and it's only be when I see that ticket stub that I'll be reminded. But yeah, so I do collect them. Probably shouldn't, but I do.
I wonder if there's any gems in there, like bands you saw before they sort of made it big, like I saw so and so for a fiver at some tiny social club venue.
There might well be. There's probably loads of bands and artists in there who have since passed on. I
Mm.
got to see David Bowie at Manchester Academy in the mid 90s, which was a ridiculously small venue for Bowie, but it was like a secret gig. So I'll have the ticket for that somewhere.
Yeah, their stuff you on like a nice collage framed
Yeah.
picture. That would look really cool. David, do you remember if there's any songs that have made you cry?
I can only think of one song that kind of makes me teary, and I'm not even entirely sure why it does. And it's actually a song from the Disney film Dumbo. It's called Baby Mine. And I think this is the bit where the mother elephant is puts a trunk through the bars
Yeah,
and patting Dumbo on the head, and that song is playing, and I just find that really affecting, and I don't know why. Arcade Fire, who are a band I really like, they'd actually did a cover version of that a few years ago, and that version tears me up as well. I just think there's something about that track that is just that gets somewhere in my soul.
interesting. I'm pretty sure there's a
I
few listeners now that are welling
want
up just thinking about
to
it.
you, by the way. Is there a song that makes you cry?
Yeah.
I mean, Speed.
Oh, crikey. Yeah, there's a few. I had, when I was in my very early 20s, I was in a relationship with a girl from Sweden. And
Mhm.
after I dropped her off at the airport when she was going back home, I had her friends that were still in the country from Denmark, Sweden, Finland. So some of them were in the car, and I was driving back into their student accommodation, and I think it was This Year's Love by David Gray came on, and
Oh,
I was a mess. And I was driving on the motorway, and it was hammering it down. So I had the wipers on full blast, and I'm pretty sure everyone in the car thought they were going to die on that journey
yeah.
because I couldn't see. I couldn't see out the window. I couldn't see because of my eyes. And then a bit later on in life, there's Still Fighting. It's a song that he wrote about his son,
Yeah.
and that makes me tear up. And when I
Yeah.
saw Ben Folds live a few years ago, they played it there, and I thought I was going to lose it then, but I managed to sort of keep myself composed. There's been quite a few. I get moved by really beautiful pieces of music and just stuff that has no right affecting me in those certain ways. So, do my son was playing. Lego Jurassic Park or Jurassic
Yeah.
World, whatever it was, and there's just some background music on, and it was just very peaceful, bit twinkly, very soothing. It didn't make me cry, but I just sat there, just kind of mesmerized by this
Yeah.
beautiful
Yeah.
melody, and I was like, "This is a Lego video game." Sort myself out, but I actually found out it's actually a real piece of music
Yeah.
from the movie that it sampled, and I sort of hunted it out and listened to it, and I can just
While we're on that topic, actually, I remember years ago, I lived with a girl for a few years and we split up. I went to move to a damp little flat in Wartling. I didn't have anything. I mean, it wasn't an acrimonious split or anything, but I moved in more or less with nothing. I had no books, no music. I didn't have a television set. And the flat itself was a fairly kind of monastic cell of a place. And I thought, this is miserable. I tell you what, I'll borrow a radio from the college I was working for at the time. So I got a radio, brought it home the next night, sat in this blank, plain little cell of a room. And I thought, I'll cheer myself up. So I put the radio on. First song that came on was The Drugs Don't Work by The Verve. And, it's a great song, but it's no party tune, is it? And it's
no.
not one to cheer you up. And every time I hear that song now, that's where I'm taken back to, trying to cheer myself up in my lonely little flat. And that's the first song that came on. Typical.
So, are there any hidden gem albums that you love or try to convert people to that they might not be aware of?
I sometimes worry that a lot of the people I listen to are not all mainstream, but if I say a name of a person I listen to, most people will have heard that name, which I always think is worrying because I think I should be listening to more obscure stuff. There's an album by a woman called Anna Calvi. Have you heard of her?
Nope.
Oh, I want to win her straight away then. Yeah, so I mean, she's done a few albums, all which are fabulous. The first album is just called Anna Calvi. I loved it, and I recommended it to a friend of mine called Nick, and he listened to it and became an obsessive Anna Calvi fan, which I like the fact that I've managed to share that with someone and they've taken it on board. So yeah, I would recommend Anna Calvi to anybody.
Can you describe the album or her style or sound?
I mean, she herself is a brilliant guitarist. The kind of fairly kind of sparse, atmospheric rock songs. She's got this incredible voice. It's almost operatic. She almost sounds like she should really be called Helga or something like that, and have blonde hair in that kind of like twisty hairstyle. She's got this really incredible operatic voice and these really strong, dramatic songs in this fantastic sort of sparse guitar style. So yeah, I would heartily recommend them.
We'll try and check that one out. Is there a turning point album for you, like something's forever tied to a personal memory or a life shift?
Well, like I say, it's easy to go back to Magical Mystery Tour because that was a major life shift in the sense of it just kind of completely switched me on to music when I hadn't been into music at all prior to that. There are albums that I can associate with times I've had some health problems the last few years. I remember having to go through a long period of chemotherapy, and I remember getting an album around about that time called Flying Dream One by Elbow. And I love Elbow anyway. And again, big famous names, nothing obscure about it. It's not one of the more famous albums though. And I just think that's such a beautiful album. Again, I would heartily recommend anybody to give that a go if they don't already know it. And of course, a good Manchester band as well. But I do find myself, it takes me back to that time, which is a weird thing to be taken back to. But I suppose, music gets you through stuff. And so you feel grateful. You can either hate music because it reminds you of a bad time, or you can love it because it got you through that bad time. And in the case of that album, it's the latter.
If you would play it for your younger self, what would you want them to notice?
To persevere with an album, I remember when I first listened to it, it didn't really kind of impinge upon me. It just sort of like washed by me. And I listened to it a few more times and a few more times. And there's one of my favorite albums. And I think that's true with a lot of art. I think I watched a documentary a few years ago about the National Gallery and people looking at paintings, describing why it's their favourite painting, and they went into so much detail and noticing this particular little detail in the corner, or do you see this figure here? And look at that sunset in the background and how it reflects. And I thought, I don't look at paintings like that. I just glance at it and move on. And I think I'm going to have to start stopping and taking the time to look at that painting. And I think music can be the same. It's like if you just sort of like let it wash over you first go and then walk on. That's you've not given it enough chance. And I think that's something I would say to my younger self is focus, take the time to appreciate stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's too many tracks more recently than back in the day where I just haven't had the patience and just skip through. And then I'm giving them second chance and like, yeah, I stopped
Yeah,
listening to this well before I should have done and just let it
yeah,
naturally play. It's almost as if you're in a rush to get it finished, but you should just be sitting there to enjoy it and not try and rush the
no,
process in a way. So but I've stopped listening to podcasts on 1.2 speed now. Just putting it back to as it should be because I feel like I'm listening to it, but I want it to be over so I can get something else listen to, and instead of
yeah,
just sitting there with it in that moment and just enjoying what it is for what it is.
exactly, yeah, yeah. There's a lesson for life there. Just enjoy the moment, embrace the moment.
Yeah, too true. David, what do you think is the most played album of your life so far?
I got a lot of albums, and I listen to a lot of albums. There's an album that I really love called "The Golden Age of Wireless" by Thomas Dolby, which came out in 1982, and it's one of those albums where I almost limit myself listening to it because I could listen to it every week, every day. It never gets tired, and that's a long time. So yeah, I probably listened to that album more than most, certainly.
Is it more of a comfort listen now, or is there still stuff that you notice in through each playthrough that kind of takes you by surprise?
A bit of both. I mean, it's a fantastic album because it's got some fantastic songs on it, and again, it comes out of that sort of early '80s synth approach, which I really engaged with at the time, and I still love a lot of that stuff now. So it's very richly put together. The instrumentation, there's so much to listen to, so it can surprise you. Even now, you could listen to it and notice some little effect or some background detail that you hadn't picked up on, just like in the background of a painting, I suppose. But yeah, it's great comfort, and that's what it takes me back to when I was a teenager, when I was 17. I think it is interesting. I'm always fascinated by the notion of why people like a certain piece of music, because people always say, "Oh, well, it reminds me of this," or "it reminds me of that," or "I associate it with this film." But surely there's some piece of music where it doesn't remind you of anything. You don't associate it with anything. You just love that piece of music, that particular sequence of notes and tones. And why? What is it about that particular sequence that appeals to you when a different piece of music doesn't? And that's always interested me. I've still not got to the bottom of why that should be. But if you listen to an album of an artist you like, some tracks you'll like, some tracks you won't. But it's the same artist, probably so it's music in a similar style. So why do you like that one and not that one?
Interesting.
There's got to be something about that particular, like I say, combination of notes and chords or whatever
Yeah.
that appeals. I don't know why.
Hmm.
I'm sure lots of people do, but I don't.
What's the best live gig you've ever seen?
That's a good one. I mean, you always remember your first one, of course, which was OMD, of course, as I mentioned. I've been to a couple of good ones recently. Towards the end of last year, I went to see another great Manchester band, the Chameleons, in Clitheroe, of all places. And they were always a great live band. And for some reason, maybe I just engaged with it more this most recent time. But that was a really great gig. But just a few months before that, myself and a friend and my son Christopher went to see They Might Be Giants at the Ritz in Manchester. If anybody doesn't know them, they're a brilliant, quirky American band. And I just noticed about 3/4 of the way through the gig that I was smiling. And I realized I'd been smiling pretty much all the way through it. And I thought, how many gigs am I just got a big grin on my face right the way through? And I noticed for that gig I did. So I'm gonna cite that one. They might be giants at the Ritz.
The Ritz is one of those live music venues that I've never been to see live music. And I was
Really?
hoping to go and see Tremonti this year, but with the release of Alter Bridge's new album, I think that's the reason why they cancelled the tour or delayed it. But yeah, it seems to be one of the venues in Manchester I've never been to see live music. I was there for Love Train on a Wednesday nights, doing embarrassing stuff in embarrassing clothing, and on the Monday nights for their like alternative metal nights that they used to have. But
Yeah.
yeah, never to see a live gig.
Oh. I think it was relatively recent. It was only like the last few years started going to gigs there. I think I
Hmm.
saw Psychedelic Furs there a few years ago, and that would have been the first time. When I was growing up, the if you went to see a band in Manchester, it was the Apollo. They didn't seem to be anywhere else. You had to schlep off to Hardwick. And then, of course, you got the Academy and then Academy 2 and various other places popping up. And, of course, the Ritz has always been there, but I never went. So it kind of, there's more of it feels to me like there's a more of a proliferation of live music venues now than there was then. Although maybe there were like underground places I wasn't aware of not being cool enough.
What's been your favourite live venue in Manchester where you've seen a band?
I quite like the Bridgewater Hall. That's nice, but then that tends to be more sort of sedate, sitting down kind of experience. But maybe that's why I like it. I mean, I like the Academy, but then the Academy was always just a great big brick cattle shed. You just sort of like pour it in, watch the gig, and pour it out. It was very functional, but then I suppose it fulfills its function. And I suppose for the last 20 years or so, I've probably seen more gigs at the Academy than anywhere else. I suppose I tend to see the kind of artists who are not small enough to play little cool clubs, but not big enough to be playing stadiums. So the Academy is the place. And
Nice.
like I said, I saw Bowie there as well,
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
which is the coolest thing.
Which album disappointed you the most?
I did mention earlier that I love the Smiths, and I do. And I know Morrissey's become more of a controversial figure in recent years, although I'm trying hard not to hold that against him. And I do feel that his initial solo albums after the Smiths split up were great albums. But I just feel with Morrissey, it feels as if it's like a law of diminishing returns. As the years go by, each successive album for me doesn't feel as good as it might be, and that's nothing to do with the controversy surrounding him. It's just the albums are not sort of like landing with me. So probably the last Morrissey album. In fact, I think he's got a new one out just now. But so I'll probably be loyal and go and buy it. But I've not been that keen on his more recent stuff. So
I'm
I think
sure I'll
that's a
turn
bit.
up in a charity shop somewhere soon.
Yeah, love him though.
Yeah. Is there an artist or a record that shaped who you are?
Mm. Let me have oh.
It could be something that maybe changed your values or your style or your worldviews or social circles.
I think I'm a bit of a musical sponge, so I tend to take on what other people. I try not to be too overly influenced by what other people listen to, as in I don't want to listen to stuff because other people listen to it or but I think it's cool to listen to. But at the same time, I like to think I'm open. So, like, there's quite a few people where I work at the moment who are really into prog rock. I've never really been into prog rock. It's not my kind of thing. As I said, I'm great, long, endless instrumental noodling. It's not really my thing. Having said that, I know people who are really into 70s Genesis, and that's caused me to think, they did some good stuff. I might start listening to that. And now I've started listening to Genesis a lot more. So I've absorbed that into my sphere of influence like an amoeba. So,
I don't think anyone's ever described themselves as an amoeba on the show up until now,
oh,
but It's always a
I've,
first time for everything.
I've extended myself and absorbed it into myself.
We're going to do the mixtape test. You're going to make a mixtape for someone special. What's the one track that you start off that mixtape with?
I'm going to say I Feel Fine by the Beatles for lots of reasons, not least of which because it was the number one song the day I was born. So I always go with that's got a little special quality for me. I also say it's also I Feel Fine was the number one song the day I was born, and that was probably the last time I actually did feel fine, that is.
Like when you were born.
Yeah. It's all been downhill from there.
So you're now in charge of making a fantasy band. Who is in it and how are you going to work together?
Let me see now. On guitar, it would have to be Johnny Marr from the Smiths. On bass, I suppose one of the greatest bass players is John Entwistle of The Who, but I do worry he might be a bit domineering in the sound, so I'd have to think about that. My favourite drummer might surprise people. I think my favourite drummer is, I think his name's Stephen Morris from originally Joy Division and then New Order.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm not a big fan of like great elaborate showing off instrumentals, and I love Stephen Morris's sort of like very sparse, driven drumming style, and I just find it compelling, and it lends itself to the music so brilliantly. So yeah, I'd have him on drums. Lead singer David Bowie. Yeah, what a band that would be.
There you
Bowie
go.
by Johnny Marr, John Entwistle, and Steve Morris. There you go.
Selling out the Academy in Manchester,
Yeah, yeah.
night after
And I'll
night
be
after night. You can
yeah,
warm up for him.
yeah. I'll be and the sport act.
Is
Brilliant.
it? Is there a song, David, that teleports you back to a time or a place that makes you smile?
Yeah, and again, it takes me back to the early '80s when I was 17, and it's a song that I love and everybody else hates, seemingly, and it's "Come On, Eileen," Dexys Midnight Runners. It's a fantastic piece of music. It's a I can tell by your face that you're not agreeing.
I don't know what it is about that song that drives me up the wall.
It seems
But
to drive a lot of people at the wall. I love it. Well, I saw one of these horrible, cheesy party compilation albums once, and there's all the awful crap that you'd imagine to be on there, like
mm,
Birdie Song or Jive Bunny. And Buddy Come On Eileen was on there. I
Jive
thought that's
Bunny.
outrageous. It's a fantastic piece of music. It's like finding Bohemian Rhapsody on there or something like that. It's like, no, it's great. I think it's a great piece of music. It's complex. It's engaging. The album it comes from is a great album. To Rye. Kevin Rowland himself is a fascinating character. Yeah, I think he's had a biography out recently, which I might
Mm.
have to get hold of. Maybe I love it because everybody else hates it.
David, can you recommend an album for us tonight? And what are you picking and why?
Let me see now. I'm actually glancing up at my actual CD collection, searching for inspiration. Well, I mentioned the Anna Calvi album and her follow-up album, which I think was called One Breath, was an incredible album. I'm gonna go with well, I mean, if I was determined at the beginning of this that I wasn't going to keep going back to the Beatles, but I'm going to say Revolver by the Beatles, 1966. It's 60 years old. It could have been recorded last week. It's a fabulous piece of music. Because I
Oh,
mean, I know a lot of people listening to this probably either don't listen to the Beatles or maybe even too young to know. The people I work with who are young enough who don't know who the Beatles are. I know that for a fact. Yeah, I would recommend that.
you need to slap some people that you work with.
I know. I'll mention that too.
I'm not advocating violence on this podcast, but maybe just push them downstairs or something.
Yeah.
Right, we're into the quick fire round. Pew pew. So just before we wrap up, I'm just going to have some quick fire questions and let's see what rolls off the tongue now.
Okay.
What would be your wrestling, boxing, or walk up entrance music?
The James Bond theme.
Oh, nice. Which version though?
Dr. No. Very first one.
What's your favourite cover song?
Again, I don't want to go about the Beatles, but Susie and the Banshees did a cover of Dear Prudence, which I think is the closest you're going to get to improving on a Beatles song.
What's the last gig that you went to?
Last music gig probably was the Chameleons at Clitheroe, which is a lovely little town. Not the place you would think of as a rock and roll central, but that was a great gig and it was a great venue as well.
If you're at a house party and you're DJing, what's the first song you're going to play? Or you've been asked to play at a house party, what's the first song you're going to go with?
Right, okay. Well, I've never DJ'd and almost certainly never will. So if, for argument's sake, someone asked me to bring my guitar along and open the night up, I always say everybody who does the open mic circuits has a go-to song, in case of emergency, break glass song. And for me, it's Daydream Believer, which is a bit cheesy, but it's a great song. So that's what I'm starting off with. That'll get everybody in some sort of mood.
Do you believe in guilty pleasures? And if so, what is your guilty pleasure track that you secretly love?
I do believe in guilty pleasures. I've got some cheesy stuff that I like. Paul McCartney's We All Stand Together, Frog Chorus. It's a lovely piece of music.
You ever tried to play that?
You know, I was invited to a gig back when I worked at Salford Uni, and the theme of the night was guilty pleasures. So everybody had to do songs which felt probably not very cool or a bit cheesy, but actually you liked them. And I think I did have a go at that without the frogs. So it was Sans Frogs. I also did Dancing Queen by ABBA on that night. And I can't remember. Oh, I think I did an Engelbert Humperdinck song as well.
David, we have come to the end of the chat. Where can the lovely people follow and support you? You said that you have a Soundcloud that you upload your songs to. Do you want to share it?
Yeah, well, it's just if I search for myself, I just search for my name. Go on SoundCloud, search for David Lockley, Lockley. That's the way you spell success. And that's where I put my stuff. It's all home recorded. I've only got a little home recording pod studio thing. So it's not like Abbey Road standard, but like again, it's good enough reproduction that at least gets the point across, I think.
Cool. I'll make sure that I leave the link in the show notes so anyone can check you out and follow along there. Final question for you, David, before we go. If you could preserve one song in a time capsule jukebox for the future, what would it be and why? I
think I would go for God Only Knows, Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys. I think it's a perfect song, perfect recording, and I can't play it. I've never been able to work out how to play it, so I'll put that forward. And in fact, if I was going to do karaoke, that's the song I'd go to, because I can't play it, therefore I'll sing along to it. There you go. The karaoke question finally works. Yeah. And that's it for today's episode of Life in Stereo. Huge thanks to David for sharing the soundtrack of his life so far. I really loved hearing about you growing up in Salford and doing your record shopping in Bolton. Would it be X Records in Bolton by any chance? It wasn't X Records, although I do go to X Records in Bolton. In fact, the record shop that I was thinking of isn't even there anymore. It's where the bus station is now. It's on that corner. I think it was in the basement of Edwin P. Lee's. You had to go downstairs to this basement record shop. Yeah, a lot of record shops are popping up in stories of memories from people. It's great to hear, but also sad to hear that they're gone as well. But never mind, they live on in our memories. Exactly. Yeah. If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And why not share this with someone who loves music as much as you do? You can also reach me on Facebook by searching for Life in Stereo Podcast. Just look for that chimp in the headphones. And that's it. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep playing those records that make your life sing.